They pay me to guard a building nobody has set foot in for 30 years. I've never been able to explain who keeps turning the lights on inside it. There's one guard on the Holloway site per night, and most nights that guard is me. It's a dead building, an old children's home that closed before I was born, fenced off, sitting on a demolition permit that never comes. Power's been cut to the place for 30 years. My job is simple. Drive out, walk the fence line twice, sign the sheet, go home. So the first night I saw the light, I told myself it was my headlights catching the glass. That works, right up until you notice the headlights are pointed at the gate. This light was behind me. Second floor, one window, warm and yellow, the color of a lamp left on in a room somebody still lives in. It was there when I pulled in. It was still there when I killed the engine and sat in the dark. I wrote down reflection anyway. It was easier than the other word for it. The Holloway Children's Home sits at the end of a gravel road, about 4 miles past the last streetlight in the county. 3 stories, red brick gone brown, most of the windows still whole. Somebody boarded the front doors years ago and then gave up on the rest. There's a chain link fence around the whole lot, a padlocked gate, and a guard shack the size of a closet just inside it. That shack is where I spend my nights. A space heater, a folding chair, a logbook chained to the desk, and a window that looks straight up at the building. I took the job because it paid cash, and nobody else wanted it. That should have told me something. It didn't, not right away. The company that owns me is called Meridian Site Services. They run guards on a dozen dead properties across the state. Empty malls, closed factories, a hospital that never opened. The pay is bad, and the shifts are long, and the whole point of the work is that nothing is supposed to happen. You drive out, you sit, you walk your loop, you go home. Boring is the product. Boring is what they're paying for. For the first few nights, that's exactly what I got. I pull in around 10, walk the fence line, east side, then west, checking the padlocks the way the sheet told me to, sign the log, sit in the shack with the heater ticking, and my phone dying slow because there's no signal out there to keep it awake. Around 2, I'd walk the loop again. Around 6, the sky would go gray, and I'd drive home and sleep through the day. The light from that first night didn't come back. I checked the second floor windows every time I did my loop, and they stayed dark, all of them, exactly as dark as 30 years of nobody should be. I decided I'd been tired. First night on a strange site, headlights, tired eyes, a trick of the glass. That's a real thing. It happens to everybody. It seemed unimportant at the time. It wasn't. 4 nights in, I pulled up to the gate, and there were 2 lights on. Not the same window. 2 different windows, both on the second floor, both that same warm yellow. One near the middle of the building, and one at the far east end. They weren't flickering. They weren't the blue-white you get from a fluorescent tube warming up. They were steady and soft, like somebody had walked into 2 rooms and switched on 2 lamps. I sat in the truck with the engine running, and I did the thing you do. I looked for the ordinary answer. Old buildings hold on to strange currents. That's a real thing, too. Or at least I thought it was. Wiring corrodes, capacitors keep a charge. Sometimes a circuit will do something for a while after the power's gone. I'd heard that somewhere. It sounded like the kind of fact that's true. So I said it out loud to the empty truck. Old wiring. Ghost current. It's an old building. Then I got out to prove it to myself. The breaker box for the whole site is a gray metal cabinet bolted to the brick by the side door, inside the fence. Meridian had told me about it on day 1. Don't touch it. Nothing works. Power's disconnected. I'd looked at it once, and never again. That night, I walked over with my flashlight, and I opened it. Every breaker was flipped to off. Every single one, in a neat down row. The way you leave a box when you're shutting a building down for good. There was dust on the switches. And above the box, where the meter should be, there was just a round hole with 2 capped wires and a faded Meridian sticker over it that said the service had been disconnected, with a date from 1991. No meter, no power coming in, a box of switches all set to off. I stepped back and looked up. Both windows were still lit. I stood there a long time, long enough that the flashlight got heavy in my hand. There's a specific feeling you get when a fact you were leaning on just goes out from under you, a kind of drop in the stomach. And I got it standing at that breaker box in the cold. The explanation I'd talked myself into 30 seconds earlier was gone, and I didn't have another one ready. I wrote it in the log the way I'd write anything. 2 lights, 2nd floor, breaker off, meter pulled, flat like a grocery list. Writing it down flat was the only way to make my hand stop. I did not sleep well that day. I kept seeing the neat row of switches, all of them down, and the windows burning above them anyway. I called my supervisor the next afternoon. His name is Dale. He runs about half of Meridian's sites, and he answers his phone like it's costing him money. I told him about the lights. I told him about the breaker box, the meter, the disconnect sticker. I tried to say it in a way that didn't sound like a man who'd lost the thread. Dale barely let me finish. He checked something on his end, found nothing that interested him, and explained the whole thing away in about 30 seconds. Residual current, he said. Old panels do it, or somebody local ran a line off a pole to squat, and the county never caught it. Happens all the time on these dead sites. Kids, drifters, whoever. He'd seen it 100 places. I was new. I'd get used to how loud an empty building can get in your head at 3 a.m. It was easier to believe him than not to. That's the thing nobody tells you. When somebody with a title and a bored voice tells you the scary thing is boring, you want it to be true so badly that you sign off and thank him. I did ask one more thing before he hung up. I asked what happened to the last guard on the Holloway site. There was a pause, just long enough. Quit, Dale said. They all quit that one eventually. Rough drive, no signal, nothing to do. Don't read into it. Then he was gone, and I was standing in my kitchen holding a dead phone, and the one thing I couldn't put down was that little pause before the word quit. The lights kept coming back after that, and they stopped bothering to be shy about it. Some nights it was 1 window, some nights 3 or 4, always the 2nd floor, always that warm color, always steady. I started logging them like weather. 3 tonight, West End, on when I arrived, off by the 2 o'clock loop. I told myself I was just a man recording a broken building. If I kept the sentences short and the words plain, I could almost believe that was all it was. Then one night, I heard the counting. I was on my west loop, walking the fence with the flashlight low, and I stopped because there was a sound coming out of the building. Thin, high, a child's voice, or something close enough to one that my body reacted before my brain did. It was doing numbers, counting, 1, 2, 3, 4, slow and even and patient, up into the teens and then starting over. I stood at the fence and I reached for every ordinary thing I could find. Wind through a broken pane can sound like a voice. A raccoon in a wall, an owl, a radio somebody left running in a squat. Anyone standing where I was standing would have thought the same. I wasn't being paranoid, not yet. So I put my face to the fence and I listened harder, the way you do when you're trying to catch a real answer. And the counting kept on. 1, 2, 3, 4. And here is the part that took the ground out from under me. It wasn't just counting. Each number landed at the exact moment a window lit up. 1, a room near the stairwell came on. 2, the room beside it. 3, the next. The voice was counting the lights on, or the lights were counting to the voice. Room by room, in a line, the way you'd walk a hallway, turning on lamps as you go. And something small and even-tempered was keeping the tally. I went back to the shack, and I did not do my second loop that night. I told myself I was tired. I'd been pulling too many overnights, not sleeping, running on gas station coffee. Tired men hear things. That held together right up until I got home at dawn, and I couldn't remember a single stretch of the drive, because the whole way back I'd been counting under my breath without deciding to. 1, 2, 3, 4, matching a voice that wasn't there anymore. The next night I found the handprints. There's a window on the ground floor by the boarded doors where the plywood is slipped, and you can see through the dirty glass into what used to be a common room. I put my flashlight to it out of habit, and on the inside of the glass, low down, about the height of a small child's shoulder, there were handprints in the grime, little ones, fingers spread, a whole scatter of them, some fresh enough to still be wet-looking in the beam. On the inside of the glass, I told myself again, squatters. Kids get in, kids leave marks. I even walked the whole fence line twice looking for the gap they'd used, the trampled grass, the footprints in the mud by the base of the chain link. There wasn't one. The padlocks were all mine. The mud outside every window was smooth. Nothing had gone in, and nothing had come out, but the little hands had been on the inside of the glass. I stood there with the flashlight shaking a hairline, and I understood that I could not walk the fence line and pretend anymore. The prints were low, they were spread, and they were pressed against the inside of a boarded, padlocked, 30 years empty building at the height of a child who wanted to see out. I want to tell you I quit right then. I didn't. I did something worse. I got curious. I started mapping the lights. I kept the logbook open on the desk and I drew the building the best I could. 3 floors of little boxes. And every night, I marked which windows came on and in what order. I told myself it was so I could give Dale something solid, a pattern, proof. That was a lie I liked. What I actually needed was to know if there was a shape to it, because a random building doing random broken things is one kind of scared, and a building doing something on purpose is another kind entirely. And I already knew in my gut which one this was. There was a shape to it. The lights never came on at random. Every night they came on in the same order, and the order was a path. Room by room down the second floor hall, west to east, one after another, the exact way a person would move if they were walking that corridor, opening doors. It was a route, and then I recognized the route, and my stomach went cold and stayed that way, because it was mine. It was the loop I walked. The lights traced the same line through the building that I traced around the fence. Whatever was turning them on was walking my rounds on the inside. I got into the office to be sure. The side door's chain had rusted enough that I could work it loose, and I told myself I was allowed. It was my site. I was security. Inside it smelled like wet plaster and old paper, and something underneath that I didn't have a word for yet. The office was a small room off the front hall with a metal desk and file cabinets that had been picked over decades ago. But in the bottom drawer of one cabinet, under a warped folder, there was a stack of clipboards, nightly sheets, bed check logs. The night staff at Halloway had done rounds. Every hour, all night, one attendant walked the halls and checked each room and marked the child present and the light out. There was a routine to it, printed right there at the top of every sheet. Walk the corridor, check each room, confirm the count, lights out behind you. Walk the corridor, confirm the count. The lights weren't malfunctioning. They weren't ghost current or a squatter's stolen line. They were a bed check. Something was walking the second floor hall every night, room by room, turning on a light in each one to see who was inside, keeping the tally out loud. And it had been doing it for 30 years, to an empty building, because nobody had ever told it the count was finished. I counted the lit rooms that night against the old roster on the clipboard. The roster listed the children by first name and a room number. I counted the lights as they came on, one by one, matching them to the names. The lights always stopped at the same number. They stopped one short of the roster. There was always one more name on the list than there were lights on the wall. One room down the east end that the count never reached, that never lit, that stayed as dark as the day the place closed. One child on the roster who never got checked. I sat in the office with the clipboard in my lap and the cold coming up through the floor. and I looked at the last name on the list, the one whose room stayed dark, and I did not want to know why that room never lit up. But I already understood that the whole thing was building toward the night it would. The smell got worse the deeper into the building I went, and the strange thing was that it wasn't a bad smell. That's what turned my stomach about it. It was warm milk, baby powder, clean laundry, and the sweetish talc smell of a nursery, the smell of a place where small children are looked after, layered right on top of 30 years of rot and rain and dead air. Two things that could not be in the same building at the same time. And they were. And the warm one got stronger the closer I came to the east end of the second floor, to the dark room, the one the Count never reached. I want to be honest about why I went up there. It wasn't courage. It was the same broken logic that had gotten me this far. I told myself that if I could just open that one door and find an empty room, a normal empty room, dust and a broken cot and nothing else, then the whole thing would collapse back into something I could explain. Anyone would have done it. You have to see the empty room to believe the room is empty. That's what I told myself on the stairs. The second floor hall was long, and the doors ran down both sides. Some stood open on dark little rooms with metal bed frames and peeling paint. Most of them were the rooms I'd watched light up from the outside. And standing in the hall, it was worse, because I could see the light switches by each door, and I knew none of them worked, and I knew the rooms lit up anyway. The door at the east end was shut, the last one, the dark one. The warm smell was thick there, milk and powder and clean skin. I put my hand on the knob, and it was not cold like the rest of the building. It was warm, not hot. Warm the way a thing is warm when a living body has just been holding it. I opened the door. It was a small room with one bed, a child's bed, low with a metal rail, and the bed was made, which nothing in that whole building was. The blanket pulled up and the pillow set, and there was an impression in it, a dent in the pillow and a long, shallow hollow down the middle of the blanket, the exact shape a small person makes when they've been lying there. I crossed the room. I put my hand flat on the blanket. It was warm. Warm like the bed had been slept in a minute ago. Warm like whoever made that hollow had only just gotten up. I stood in a room in a building with no power and no people and no way in, at 3 a.m, with my hand on a warm bed, and I understood that the last name on the roster, the child the Count never reached, had never left. I did not run. I walked out of that room very carefully, the way you back away from an animal, and I pulled the door to behind me, and I did not go up to the second floor again for a long time. But I couldn't stop feeling it. The warmth of that blanket stayed in my hand for the rest of the shift, the way a smell stays in your nose. My palm remembered it. It was the most ordinary warmth in the world, and that was the whole horror of it. There was nothing monstrous about a warm bed. That was what I couldn't get past. The old caretaker found me before I found him. His name was Earl, and he'd been the groundskeeper at Holloway when it was still open, and he still lived in a trailer about a mile down the gravel, close enough to see the building's roofline over the trees. Meridian didn't know he existed. Nobody did. He drove up to the gate one gray morning while I was signing out, an old man in a truck older than me, and he sat there with the window down, looking up at the building for a while before he said anything. "You've been up on the second floor," he said. It wasn't a question. "You've got the look." I didn't answer. He nodded like I had. I told him what Dale had told me. Old wiring, residual current, a squatter's stolen line. I said it the way you say a prayer you don't believe anymore, hoping somebody will tell you it's true. Earl listened to the whole thing, and then he shook his head, slow, and every explanation I'd been carrying went out at once, because I could see in his face that he'd heard every one of them before, and buried all of them. "The power's off at the pole," he said. "County pulled the meter in 91. I watched them do it. There's no line into that building, stolen or otherwise. I'd know. I walk this ground every day." He looked at me. "You already checked the box. You already know the switches are down." I did. I'd known for weeks. Hearing him say it just took away the last place I'd been hiding. Then Earl told me the part I'd been circling. There'd been a fire the last winter the home was open. Not a big one. It started at the east end of the second floor, late, after lights out, and the night attendant got everyone down the stairs and out onto the lawn and counted heads in the cold. Confirmed the count the way the sheet said, and the count came up one short. They went back in. They didn't find anyone. The fire was small and the smoke was bad, and in the dark and the panic, somebody had miscounted. That was the ruling. The roster was wrong. There'd never been a child in that last room at all. The home closed that spring. Everyone moved on. Everyone but Earl, who stayed in his trailer down the road, because he'd been the one holding the flashlight the night they searched, and he had never once believed the room was empty. Every night since, he said, that count runs again, room by room, and every night it comes up one short, and it stops, and it waits, because the attendant that started it never finished it, and you don't leave a bed check half done. He looked up at the dark window at the east end. It's been waiting for somebody to walk the last room, he said, to turn on the last light, to reach the last name. Don't, he said. Whatever you do out here, whatever you hear, you don't finish the count. You let it stop one short like it always does. You let that room stay dark. I asked him what happens if it doesn't stop one short. If the count ever reaches the end. Earl started his truck. He looked at me for a second through the open window. An old man who'd been guarding a dark room from a mile away for 30 years. The roster had one more name than there were beds, he said. Always did. You don't want to find out whose. Then he drove off down the gravel and left me at the gate with the sun coming up, and no explanation left standing between me and that building. I don't know what was different about the last night. Maybe nothing. Maybe it had just waited long enough. I pulled in around 10 and the building was already lit. Not one window, not 3. The whole second floor. Every room down the hall, warm and yellow and burning at once. More light than that dead place had held in 30 years. And the counting was going, but fast now. Not the slow, patient tally I'd gotten used to. Quick, eager. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, racing down the hall. And I sat in my truck with the engine running, and I watched the lights chase the numbers east, toward the dark room, faster than they had any right to go. I should have driven away. I want you to know I thought about it. I had the truck in reverse. But the count was climbing toward the number it always stopped at, the number that was one short, and I couldn't make myself leave without knowing whether Earl was right, whether it would stop. It reached the number, the second to last light. It should have stopped there. Every night for 30 years it had stopped there. It didn't stop. The voice said the next number, the last name, and the light in the East End room came on. The dark room lit up warm and yellow like all the rest, and the whole building went quiet at once. The counting done, the bed check finished, 30 years of waiting closed out in a single breath. And in that quiet, I heard something on the shack window beside me, and I turned, and there was breathing on the glass, fogging it, slow and small and close, right at the height of a child, from the outside of a window that faced an empty lot inside a locked fence. I did not open the door. That much I did right. There was a shape in the fog on the glass. Small. I won't tell you I saw a face, because I didn't, not really. Just a paleness, low down, and the suggestion of a shoulder, and a hand that came up and pressed flat against the glass from the outside. Fingers spread, the same size as the prints I'd found on the inside of that other window, weeks before. The hand stayed there. The breathing fogged and cleared, fogged and cleared. And a voice, thin and even and terribly patient, the same voice that had done the counting, said one thing through the glass. It said, "Are you the new one?" I didn't answer. I couldn't. I sat with my hands locked on the wheel and my eyes on the little hand on the glass. and the voice waited, the way it had waited 30 years. And then it said, softer, almost kind, good. Everyone's here now. You can turn out the lights. The hand slid off the glass. The breathing stopped. And one by one, room by room, west to east, the lights in that building went out. A bed check. Run backward. Lights out behind you. The way the sheet always said to finish it. When the last window went dark, I finally got the truck moving, and I drove the gravel road too fast in the dark. And I did not count on the way home, and I did not go back. Meridian pulled the Holloway contract 2 weeks later. The demolition permit finally came through, 30 years late, and a crew took the building down in a single week. I drove out once while they were doing it, and watched a machine fold the east end of the second floor into the rest, and I felt something let go in my chest, some knot I'd been carrying, because whatever had been walking those rooms didn't have any rooms left to walk. That's the version I tell people, that it's over, that it was old wiring after all, or a squatter with a stolen line and a small child I never got a clear look at, and a lonely man's mind doing what lonely minds do on the far side of too many overnight shifts. It's a good version. Every piece of it could be true. I'd take it if I could. Here's why I can't. Meridian kept me on. New site, another dead property 40 miles away, a closed elementary school this time, boarded and fenced and cut off from the pole. My first night there, I pulled up to the gate around 10, headlights on the chain, and I sat in the truck and did the thing I always do now before I get out. I looked up at the building. I counted the dark windows. I made sure they stayed dark. They didn't all stay dark. Second floor, east end. One window came on, warm and yellow, the color of a lamp left on in a room somebody still lives in. And under my breath, before I could stop myself, without deciding to, I started counting. Because Earl told me the roster always had one more name than there were beds. He just never told me that when you finish a bed check, when you reach the last name and turn out the lights and say, everyone's here now, you don't end the count. You take it with you. Holloway is gone. The count isn't. It found a new hall to walk, and I think I'm the one carrying it there. And every empty building I sit in from now on is going to light up room by room until somebody new pulls up to the gate and looks up and hears a patient little voice ask them if they're the new one. I hope it isn't you.